Hello, and welcome to the Social Connect. My name is J.F. Whitaker. I am your host and author of The Day Before I Died. Today's topic is PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm going to talk about some of the symptoms and my experience with post-traumatic stress disorder, and then our special guest will talk about treatment for post-traumatic stress. The symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder fall into basically four categories. Number one, intrusive memories, disturbing, recurrent, and unwanted memory. Category two, avoidance, not thinking about or talking about the traumatic experiences or avoiding people, places, and things that remind us of that traumatic experience. Negative changes in thinking and moods, like negative thinking about yourself, hopelessness, the inability to have positive experiences, feeling emotionally numb or emotionally disconnected from family and friends. And the fourth category is changes in physical and emotional reaction. For instance, being frightened easily or easily startled, constantly on the alert for danger, trouble sleeping, or engaging in self-destructive behavior like drinking too much. Many of the suicides of our military personnel and veterans were precipitated by PTSD. And September is a National Suicide Prevention Month. So I think it's appropriate that we focus on this topic and see what we can do to help our fellow veterans and military personnel. I do have a special guest, as I threatened you with, and it is Debbie from, I'll talk more about her later, but she's from Veterans Village, San Diego. Veterans Village was originally called Vietnam Veterans of San Diego, and they changed their name to better reflect their mission, which is to restore the lives of all veterans in need. And Debbie works with veterans suffering from PTSD. Debbie's specialty is, if I can get this right, EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And she will talk more about that since I can hardly even get the title out. So we'll let her do that. PTSD is not something that's new. Okay? In the World Wars, it was called shell shock or combat neurosis. It was only in the 1970s that the term PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder was coined, and it was coined in response to the issues that Vietnam veterans were trying to deal with. So, been around for a while. And like I said, I'm going to share some of my experiences with you. But as you know, we do this Social Connect once a month now. Our next program is October the 10th at 10 a.m. Please put it on your calendar, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And if you have any topics that you would like us to talk about that we have not covered in our first 6, or this one, 7 web series, then please suggest them. We will do them in October if we possibly can, or we will do them in a future program. Please participate. And for those of you that have purchased the book, thank you so much. You're making a difference, helping us support others. If you've written a review on Amazon, that's even better. That makes a big, big, big. I appreciate that. In a previous web series, I said, when I came home from Vietnam, I wanted to be your hero. But how could I be your hero when I couldn't even open the door and go out to buy groceries? How could I be your hero when I was afraid of the dark? How could I be your hero when I was constantly staring into the bottom of the drink? I'd like to share some of my experiences with you from the book, The Day Before I Died. Travelers to other countries regularly experience young children selling them gum and candy and having cute conversations and possibly snapping a selfie with the kids. In Vietnam, children, or those who look like children, were trained to throw grenades into buses, shops, and restaurants. We put screens on our bus windows so the grenades bounce back and then sail through the open window and come to rest on the floors at our feet. We sit with our backs to a wall in a restaurant and have an exit strategy mapped out. Someone threw a grenade through the door. In that environment, we lost the stereotype of childish innocence. We lost the distinction between men, women, and children. In the extreme, we didn't see human anymore. We just saw the enemy. My new reality didn't even agree with me, but it's permanent. It doesn't make it right. But 45 years later, now 50, I still sit in restaurants with my back to the wall facing the door so I can see if anyone throws a grenade through the door. And I have my exit strategy plan. 45 years later, I am still silent because you don't need as much courage and strength doors of your secret. It required less strength to stay locked up in my mind than it did to convince others to understand and accept. I know when I was lost, I had no way forward. When I looked back, all I saw was sorrow. It's not good to look back, see only sorrow, or to look around and be clothed in the worry of today. The devastating part of being lost is not to see a future. The forest of my tomorrow was so dense, no light penetrated to lead me forward. The greatest challenge of the homecoming was the total disconnection from everyone and everything. In Vietnam, no one knew what to expect or what to do next. We were a family of men, men who understood, men who shared their courage and strength, men who did whatever was necessary to ensure we make it through the night. It wasn't the gender that was important, it was the shared experience. It was the connection and the ability to learn, even when we didn't know what we were doing. We had each other to lean on and share a common, although unusual experience. We spoke the same language, learned the nuances of a look or a slight movement, and took the hits for one another. We did things we didn't know how to do with courage and confidence, instilled by standing side by side with peers. We learned as we ran and flew, and we were not. I don't know how I got to this darkness. I don't know how my world got so small. I came from Ozzie and Harriet and Leave It to Beaver, Cleaver family. I came from a protected, demanding, rigid, and religious life, but a full, bright, and happy place. I was planning on building a bright and happy future. There was everything to look forward to, and then the darkness descended. I tried to carry on, but the weight of my secrets became unbearable, and the drinking was alcoholic. I drank every day and every night. I drank for the strength to go on and to forget and to keep me on the straight and narrow. I drank to shrink my world and create routines that hid the essence of me. No matter how much I drank, I could not change me. I wanted to numb the pain. If any joy or happiness was present in my life, I didn't notice. It was like watching the old black and white TV. No color and all terror. I was 7 again, and I wanted to put on my jacket and go find someone to hold my hand and make me feel safe. There are many ways to commit suicide. You can do it quickly with a gun or slowly by drinking yourself to death, and I was on the latter path. Bertrand Russell said, drunkenness is temporary suicide. I was contemplating making it permanent. After all, it was a struggle to get up, dress, open the door, and go for groceries. It took effort to be on full alert for the next attack. It took so much energy to look in front, in back, and on both sides, to look above and below, to see, to hear, and to be ready for what might come. I was tired. My country sent me off to fight a war no one wanted, and I never came home. No one was even there to talk about it, and I thought I was safe in silence. I could handle the war, the memories, and the sounds. What I couldn't handle was the sound of silence. I shrunk my world until it didn't matter anymore. I avoided contact with other people, other situations to remain hidden. I put one foot in front of the other and did the bare minimum to survive. and it backfired. With a world so small and devoid of emotion, what did I have to lose? It would only take one small step to leave such a small world. Pain would stop, and what had I given up? Small, dark, and lonely world that was not to enjoy. That's where I started. Obviously, no, I'm not there today, which I'm very pleased to report. I am definitely not there today, but that's how it was, and that's how it is. I imagine for many of our veterans. And I experienced those symptoms I talked to you about earlier in the introduction. I experienced the intrusive memories, the avoidance, the change in negative changes in thinking and mood, and the changes in physical and emotional reaction. And yes, one I didn't read about is I got up every single night and checked every single window and every single door in the house to make sure it was locked so that I was safe against the next attack. We're on Main Street, USA. So people who suffer from PTSD use our support. And for those of you, so you can relate a little bit, PTSD-like symptoms we all experience. For instance, let's say you burn your hand on a stove. Then when you walk by the stove, you have an initial reaction, or you have flinch, or you pull back, or you hold off, or you avoid using the stove, or whatever. Those are symptoms, PTSD-like symptoms. But they only become PTSD when they persist and last for a long time. And sometimes if the experience is really, really traumatic, the experiences won't surface for many, many years. So with that, I'd like to introduce our special guest today, who will talk more about the treatment side of working with veterans with PTSD, and that is Debbie Malloy. Debbie Malloy has a master's degree in clinical mental counseling from Walden University. She has a master's degree in recreational therapy from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She's worked in many, many, many different environments like hospital, outpatient clinics, private practices, and of course now with Veterans Village San Diego. Debbie has taught us at San Diego State University and many community colleges. I am very, very grateful she's here with us today, and I can't wait to hear what she has to say. Debbie, the microphone is yours.
Hi, I told Joe that the book blew me away, and I wanted to just share a few of my thoughts before I go into more clinical information about the intervention that I used, and also a little bit more about PTSD and anxiety issues related to trauma. My husband is a Vietnam vet, and I remember listening to him and his cohorts talk about how sad it is that when they came back from Vietnam, they were spat at and denigrated and just treated terribly. And I think, you know, they're delighted to see that today's active duty military are treated in a different manner, and even they are treated in a different manner. My husband was the keynote speaker in Balboa Park when they opened the Vietnam Veterans Museum, and he was really honored to do that. And so, you know, he feels like they're starting to show them the respect that they deserve. I was also raised as an Irish Catholic girl in Chicago, and so I could relate to, in the 50s and 60s, and I could relate to a lot of the experiences that Joe had in that realm. Messages that children receive, whether intended or not on the part of parents, teachers, or caregivers, are taken throughout life. And they can add to the bricks in the backpack or the gunny sack weighing someone down. I like to use the image quicksand when they're negative. They're still breathing, but those bricks are really patting them down. And on page 246 of the book, you address that. My almost 30-year-old son recently revealed that when he was 4 or 5, we had a birthday party for him. It was a Power Ranger party, and he had a little Power Ranger costume on, and we hired some Power Ranger actors to come in the full costume. And when they came, he hid away and, you know, just wouldn't even engage. And I was really upset with him and frustrated. And recently he just said to me, well, I didn't want them to think I was a poser. I didn't want them to think I was a fake or a phony, because they were the real ones. And it was like, where did he get that message? And so I think he's taken some of that with him into adulthood, but he's been able to address it. But it's like the child is father to the man. And we as adults have taken a lot with us from our childhood, the good and the bad. I thought that on page 94, the letter from your father did display a lot of wisdom that he shared. And I thought that was interesting to see that. Many individuals who experience PTSD as adults have experienced multiple traumatic incidences at a much younger age. And they start using drugs or alcohol to help them deal with or dull the challenging symptoms and pain, because they received the messages that they needed to keep their emotions to themselves. I recently met with 2 new clients of mine that are going to be working with me when I use EMDR, and they related that they tried to commit suicide at 10 years old and younger. So that just kind of mortified me. Millions of people experience a spectrum of social anxiety, and some decide to drink or use because they believe the substances reduce their anxiety and their PTSD symptoms and allow them to be more comfortable in social situations. They often think, if people knew the real me, I would be rejected. EMDR can help the adult become in touch with the inner child and find a way to be kinder and gentler to the inner child and gain insights about what really happened to them. On page 153, Joe talks about not giving up on himself. And I always say that to the people that I serve. I work in a primarily substance use program, but just about everybody that we see has a co-occurring mental health disorder. And I would say, I don't know what percentage, but probably 90% of the people that we see have symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, in addition to maybe depression or bipolar disorder. Some have schizoaffective disorder or other kinds of serious mental health issues. I like the idea of not giving up on yourself, and I encourage people who are using or drinking and trying to embrace recovery to never give up on themselves, even if they have a lapse or a relapse, and to be in the silo of those that are successful at some point in their lives to embrace permanent recovery, that they learn to love themselves enough to develop the strategies and support networks that assist them in the permanent recovery, like Joe has found. Addictions deceive people and allow them to romanticize the substances and the accompanying short-term benefits. The falsehoods of isolation, like Joe addressed, and the truth of the easing the misery often elude. And another page, 184, dealing with the pain of secrecy. Everybody that I've talked to in the program tries to keep their addictions a secret until they just can't anymore, and then they isolate themselves. There's the hopelessness and the depression, and thinking there's no opportunity for a better quality of life. They believe that the substances are their only friend, their only solution, and their self-medication. Not realizing that there's a myriad of sober fun activities that could provide many of the benefits. They just kind of give up for a lot of people. And as a recreation therapist, I really focus also on sober fun. And, I try to integrate that into some of my process groups and with my individual clients to get them to develop the kinds of things that are going to nourish them in a much healthier way than the substances that they thought could do. Also on page 214, Joe mentions taking it 1 minute at a time, and I totally agree with that. For so many people, the 1 day at a time concept is way too much. When they're newly in recovery, that's a lifetime. And so I sometimes say, take 5 minutes at a time, take the 15 or 20 minutes or however long it takes for your craving to pass, and try to distract and do the things that, might be helpful to you so that, you can move forward. One of my clients related to me that one time he was having a craving and his sponsor, he called his sponsor, and his sponsor said, go wash your car. And he came back after he washed his car the first time, and the sponsor called his sponsor, and the sponsor said, go wash your car again. I think by the time he'd washed his car the third time, the cravings had long passed and he had moved forward. So getting that support network and taking it, 1 minute at a time or a few minutes at a time can really be important. And helping someone find his or her resilience. For us, somebody that's in a program is trying to find their inner resilience, their inner strength. I use the analogy that some of us might be able to remember. There were those old inflatable, I used to call them the Bobo dolls. They were the clowns. They were about 3 feet tall. They were made out of some type of plastic. They were inflated, and I think they had sand or something in the bottom. And when you punched them, they bounced back up immediately. And so I like to talk about resilience in that manner. Maybe a little air has come out, but let's help you fill up the Bobo doll with the air again, so you can come back up and right yourself again and find the better quality of life. I liked when Joe said in his book, history is not a predictor of the future. Reprocessing trauma with protocols, such as I utilize in eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, allows traumatic memories and may assist with the accompanying addictions to no longer be the monsters over someone, creating havoc and compromising their systems. Trauma then becomes historic facts, and the clients gain insights about themselves and the others as their brain seeks to heal. They no longer have the monsters in their nightmares. They're no longer needing to sit in a corner or be afraid to go to a grocery store or a movie theater around crowds. And it really helps them to heal. I like the fact that Joe said temporary problems do not call for permanent solutions. Holding on to the traumatic memories can be reduced or eliminated if they receive proper interventions, and it helps them to process the memories. People can find peace and hope again and jettison the thoughts of suicide or self-harm and artificial numbing of emotional pain. And I really try to incorporate self-compassion to enhance ourselves and love ourselves, mistakes and all. And I like the term and the concept self-compassion better than self-esteem, because to me, with self-esteem, for example, if you take a test and you get an A on a test, with self-esteem, you're in the clouds, you're really happy. The next week you could get an F on a test and you're in the trash can. But with self-compassion, you get an A on a test and you think, oh, that's great. And if you get an F on the test the next week, you say, I need to study more, I need to do better, maybe this isn't my best subject. You're still kind and loving to yourself, and you can look at the outside issue or the situation and not take ownership of I'm a failure, I'm a bad person, or anything like that. You're able to, again, take a healthier, balanced attitude. EMDR offers a list of negative cognitions as part of the reprocessing process, which I'll cover in a little bit. But in Joe's book on page 223, he described having heaped on responsibility where it did not belong. And that's exactly what we address in EMDR. There's a list of 4 categories where there are negative concepts that people take with them throughout life that add to their traumatic memories. I was responsible, I'm not worthy, I'm a failure. All of these really negative things. And there's a list of about, I don't know, 30 or 40 of them. And we address where people feel that. And some people have so many that they embrace and hold on to for themselves that they can't even come up with one. And it's just like, okay, we need to really focus this. So that negative cognition is an important part of reprocessing, and the heaping on a responsibility that really doesn't deserve to be owned is just so important. The I deserve to be miserable is just, something that we have to help people get past. Looking back with a healthier mindset or a reprocessed trauma memory, the adult understands what the young child could not easily comprehend, like the way that Joe demonstrated something he might have said to his father during that first incident with the neighbor when he was 7 years old. As adults, we can sit back and say, I would like to have done this, but as a child, we don't have the tools to be able to put those thoughts together. We're mortified, we're afraid, and then we start owning the negatives and we take that with us. There's a focus on the negative and the pain rather on the more beautiful experiences in life. And the thing that I like about neuroplasticity in our brains is it allows our brains to form new nerve cells in the process to healing from disease and healing and responding to new changes and new situations. I like the analogy of taking a cement mixer to the old neural pathways that are so negative and well-worn and have caused us I'm a failure, I'm not worthy, and cementing those over and taking a backhoe and digging out the new nerve pathways, the neural pathways, and allowing ourselves to make that metamorphosis and to evolve into a healthier, stronger human being that has a better quality of life. And so I'd like to just kind of reiterate some of the things that Joe talked about with the aspects of PTSD. Basically, until you have experienced these things for 30 days, it's in the diagnostic and statistical manual, which clinicians use to diagnose people with mental health disorders. It's called acute stress disorder. And that can occur from 2 to 30 days after an experienced trauma. And basically, the individual has to either have directly been exposed to the trauma, have witnessed a trauma, have learned that a relative or close friend has been exposed to a terrible trauma, or have indirect exposure to an adverse detail of the trauma, usually in the course of professional duties, often first responders or medics. I have a friend who is a first responder, and he had some serious PTSD from having been a first responder. And so he turned to substances, and now he's trying to heal, and he's getting the therapy and the treatment that he needs. The traumatic experiences are re-experienced. As Joe mentioned, it could be nightmares, flashbacks, unwanted memories, emotional distress, and physically reacting to the traumas. The avoidance of the thoughts or feelings and the reminders, the negative thoughts, the inability to recall certain features of the trauma, and exaggerated blame of self or others, the negative affects, the decreased interest in activities, the isolation, difficulty experiencing positive emotions, and then the inability, the irritability or aggression, risky or destructive behaviors like participating in substance use or drinking a lot of alcohol, the hypervigilance, like needing to sit in a corner if you're out in public, the heightened startle response. I remember going up behind my husband one time when we first met, and he was at a drinking fountain, and I just kind of touched him on the back, and he twirled around, and he's a very big man, and he said, "You're lucky I didn't deck you." And I was like, what? And so that was about 10 years after he'd come back from Vietnam, and I was like, oh gosh, I'm never doing that again. And so, you know, even somebody that maybe has some minor of the criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder, they can still hold on to that for many, many years. And so the VA recognizes 3 interventions that they use to treat post-traumatic stress disorder for veterans or active duty military. And they include cognitive processing therapy, which includes group involvement. It includes writing narratives about the trauma so that eventually somebody becomes desensitized to it and processes it the right way with a clinician and with others who are a support system. The second one is prolonged exposure therapy, and it's just what it is. With a clinician, the client re-experiences and gets re-exposed to the therapy week after week after week by recounting specific incidences related to the trauma and going over and over again. There's quite a bit of a dropout rate in that intervention, and so I never was interested in pursuing that one, although some people say it can be very effective in getting people to become desensitized to their traumas. And then the last one is the one that I embrace, and I am a huge proponent of it because I just have seen person after person after person clear out traumas in a very rapid amount of time. Each person is different, and some people can clear out one trauma in one session. And so some people take longer, some people take a few weeks. I had one client that took a few months to clear out one trauma. I've seen other people clear out several traumas and clear out one a week. It just depends on how their brain is ready, if they're not allowing if they're allowing their brain to do whatever it needs to do. And I tell people, your brain is smart, it wants to heal. It may not make sense to you where your brain is going as you reprocess this trauma, but let it do whatever it needs to do. If somebody is trying to force something or has obstacles that are keeping them from getting in touch with reprocessing the trauma, if they're so afraid to reprocess the trauma, then it's going to take a lot longer. But typically, if people are really motivated to get rid of that brick in their backpack or in their gunny sack or whatever, just to get rid of it, they can reprocess the traumas really quickly. And then after they reprocess an individual trauma, they will process the triggers that go along with that trauma. For example, if somebody has a recent trauma where they were held up at gunpoint, they can reprocess their specific trauma and start to remember specifics about the event and the perpetrator and all that. But in addition, they may get re-triggered, even if they've cleared out their own trauma, they may get re-triggered by hearing about a burglary or a robbery, hearing about something like that on the news, on television, seeing that in a movie. And so that could be a re-triggering event. So what we do with the individuals is sit with them and try to list everything that they could think of that could be a potential trigger for them to get re-triggered. And there's a whole process that we use to help them clear out the triggers as well. And so we do that after they've cleared out the trauma. And what I also ask my clients to do is, if there's ever a time where they get re-triggered by something they could not have anticipated at this point, to go back and see a therapist and that is trained in EMDR from the EMDR Institute, and have them help them clear out that specific trauma. So, but anyway, EMDR is a psychotherapy focused on trauma symptoms and emotional distress. And as I mentioned, it can be accomplished in one session, where other types of therapy might take years to do for someone that has post-traumatic stress disorder. Complex protocols and procedures within EMDR allows the brain to heal similar to the manner that we might recover from a physical trauma. The mind's information system, the mind's information processing system, naturally strives towards achieving mental health and a balance. But when we're confronted with obstacles due to the aftermath of disturbing events, the emotional wounds might fester and create the perfect storm of intense suffering. But once the roadblocks are removed through the reprocessing process, there's an activation of a natural healing process. And there are decades worth of evidence on an international basis that EMDR is a very effective protocol to help people to overcome the symptoms, the very troubling symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And it is definitely a recognized form of trauma treatment. And it started in the 1980s with a Dr. Francine Shapiro. She was walking around a lake with ducks, she said, and she was having her own issues that she was trying to process. And she said, as she was walking, which is also a bilateral brain stimulation, that she was moving her eyes back and forth. And she said she walked a little further and realized her distress started to reduce. And she thought, well, okay. And so she walked some more and moved her eyes some more, and her stress became even more reduced and more clear, and she was able to think more clearly. And so she started doing research on that. And some other scientists have likened it to rapid eye movement sleep, where we get into after about 4 hours of sleep, we get into the deeper rapid eye movement sleep where we're able to process events of the day. Well, a lot of people who have PTSD have insomnia, have nightmares, and they're never able to get into that full rapid eye movement to help them to process the severe traumas. And so this helps them to do that. And the negative thoughts that individuals have been holding on to about him or herself or the world in general become more positive and realistic as they process the traumas, and the insights are gained, and people can feel empowered over their lives again. And as I mentioned, the monsters that were over them, the monsters of the traumas and the PTSD symptoms, simply become something that's historic and that happens, and it's put into perspective, and people can gain a lot of insights. I had a client who had terrible childhood trauma say, well, my mother did the best she could. She didn't know any better. She had her own mental health issues. And it was like, yes, you know, and then he found a way to forgive her. And that was so healing for him. And he told me that his psychiatrist didn't even recognize him anymore, that he had healed so much. And it was just, I almost started crying, because it was like, wow, it was so powerful for him to, after decades of carrying around those god-awful bricks in his backpack and going through the military and dealing with all these different things, he was able to release some of those earlier traumas that he experienced. And for people that have early childhood traumas, it's easier for them to get re-traumatized in adult life. And then it's that complex trauma that just is, you know, causes them to feel hopeless and helpless. And so if we can target the early traumas, what we do is target the early traumas first and clear out the triggers and then build up. And I liken, again, to my analogies, to building a staircase. If that bottom stair is crumbling, you really can't get up to the top stair. So we deal with the bottom stair, the earliest traumas first, and then go step by step by step by step to the top of the stairs, and dealing with the later, in chronological order, the later traumas and later triggers, and then move up from there. So basically—
Debbie, I wish I had known about EMDR a long time ago.
Yeah, it's amazing. So many people don't know about it, and we really need to get the word out to more and more people. I'm the only one of the clinicians at VBSD in my program that's trained in EMDR. And so I'm taking on a lot of other people's, they have their primary clinician, and then I see them just for EMDR therapy. So I wish I could just do EMDR by itself, because it is such a powerful therapy. And then the others can help them with their relapse prevention plans and other mental health issues. But EMDR can help people with the traumas, with phobias, with other anxiety issues, so that they no longer have the panic attacks and, you know, those kinds of things. But basically, there's an 8-phase protocol within EMDR. The first phase is the history taking phase, although I change it up. Phase 2 is where we install, actually with eye movements, a safe place. And people are blown away by the safe place. We ask them to choose someplace that they have felt safe, or someplace they can imagine. That's a wonderful place. It could be a beautiful mountain scene, or a beach, or a fort that they had as kids, or someplace wonderful that they just want to embrace, a room or whatever. And then we have them enhance it with imagining it with their 5 senses. And then we install that as they think about the calm feelings that they have throughout their body. And then we have them give it a name. And then we install that with eye movements as well. And then we have them kind of test it out, thinking about some things that would irritate them, and then bringing up their name, the name of their safe place, and seeing what it does for them. And it just blows them away. And some of them start crying, and they're like, well, yeah, why didn't I know about this earlier? And I'm like, you know, it's very powerful. It's called the safe place. So I do that first because getting the trauma history can be very triggering for people. So I want them to be safe whenever they leave a session with me. So I do the safe place before we ever do anything else, and then I move forward. And for some people that aren't ready to get into the traumas, they can have the safe place if they get triggered by something. And then when they're ready to do the actual trauma work, they have something that they can use.
Debbie,
Yes.
let's see if our audience has specific questions.
Absolutely.
Related to either PTSD or EMDR, so that we can certainly focus this on some of their needs. Absolutely. And some of their concerns. So sure. James, do we have any questions?
You're welcome to put your questions here in the chat, or you can just ask. The floor is yours. You can unmute yourself. Would love to hear any questions to Joe or Debbie, anything that you have pressing.
Joe, it's David. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I don't really have a question, but I did want to share that I really found Deborah's content interesting and, you know, solution oriented. I'm always looking for ways in which we can help people who are struggling, and in, you know, just practical ways. And I think you helped me with just a number of things. I know a lot of people, not just veterans, who use that list of "I'm not worthy," et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and different versions, how they make it work for themselves, and how Joe has described, you know, living for years in a kind of hiding from his reality. I also liked when you talked about how they feel when they get to the other side. And I think that's what Joe described as well, in terms of owning his circumstances. Unfortunately, I think he had to do it alone, and he powered through it. But in the end, it was something he could understand that just happened to him. It wasn't a result of him, but it just happened to him, and didn't make him a bad person. So I really appreciated what you had to say, and I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Did somebody just ask a question, James, about controversial?
Yeah, I have one in the chat. So there was a question of, you know, is EMDR still controversial in some professional circles?
You know, it may be, but the more professionals, I talk to MDs who say, oh my gosh, my patients who had PTSD and got EMDR treatment are different people. I talked to a lot of my coworkers, former coworkers, who are all trying to get trained in EMDR. It's expensive, and that's a drawback for some people. But many of my coworkers or former coworkers are hoping to get trained in it because they see the value in it. So there may be some people that still don't believe in it, but I talked to a client of mine when I was working in a private practice, and she came in with 6, I think I mentioned this, she came in with 6 traumas, and she cleared out a trauma a week, and then the triggers the next week over a 12-week period. And then at the very end, she said, I have a phobia. And I said, let's clear that out with EMDR. And she looked mortified. And within 10 minutes, she cleared out her phobia. And it was very traumatic clearing it out, but it took 10 minutes. So, and she felt safe with me. So she called me like two years later, And I had an opportunity to talk to her, and I was a little afraid to ask her. And I said, "How are you doing?" And she said, "Debbie, I have never felt better in my life." So it was a relief to hear her say that, and to know that EMDR has helped her on a permanent, hopefully permanent basis, but 2 years is a good start. But there's been over 30 years of research done all over the world with, you know, millions of people, I think, have been helped with EMDR on an international basis. And people just seem to really benefit from it. I know when I was trained, we had to come up during the training, we also had to be a client, a clinician, and an observer. So we had to come up with our real own issues and go through the process. And I know it helped me with my real own issue, and it never bothered me again like it had ever. And I've done that now, even with the, there's a really nice protocol that I can teach people, and it's called the butterfly hug, where you cross your arms and you put them on your shoulder, and you can alternately give yourself a tap like that, or you can interlock your fingers and tap over your heart. And if you're stressed out about something, you have to say to yourself, "I'm going to be okay," and focus for about a minute on that alternating brain stimulation. I remember my dog died almost 3 years ago. And about 2 months after that, I was just sobbing, and I was really upset. I really missed my dog. And I thought, wait a minute, Debbie, you got tools. You got tools, use them. So I used the butterfly hug, and within a minute, I was calmer. And I've never been, I miss my dog, but I was never that sad again about him. And it was really helpful for me. So I know it works because from a personal basis, it's helped me. And I've seen it help all the clients that I've had, and they swear by it. And I haven't talked to anybody that I've worked with because I've only been using it for a few years. So I don't know long term, but hopefully it is. I mean, the research seems to show it's long term and it's permanent.
Some people ask me, do you still experience some of the symptoms of PTSD from Vietnam? And I always want to answer that with a yes, but there's a major, major difference. When I first experienced some of those symptoms, like I would go into a restaurant, it was absolutely a necessity that I sat with my back to the wall. I could not sit in the restaurant and face away from the door and last for a meal. It was a necessity. Now it's a preference. It's not a trauma. It's not that big monster that you talked about hanging over my head. And I can go in, and when I'm with people that I don't know, or I'm on a business meeting, I'm certainly not going to ask them to change seats so that I can sit facing the door. But I used to do that. And in fact, in 2012, that's what precipitated writing the book. Was I walked into a restaurant with my granddaughter, and she sat with her back to the wall. And I said, "Oh no, honey, Grandpa sits there." And she said, "Why? So you can be Mr. Social?" And I said, "No, so I can see if they throw a grenade in the door." Well, you could imagine the response from the granddaughter.
Yeah.
It was very interesting. And she said, "You never talk about it. Let's talk." And that's what started it all for me. And I certainly appreciate. James, were there any more questions?
Looks like Kim has her hand up.
All right, where is Kim?
Hi, gorgeous.
Hi, Kim, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I just love you. I love how vulnerable you are and how open you are to sharing. Deborah, a question for you, and it's just kind of in the back of my mind. I've obviously done a lot of work throughout my journey. I've never gotten to the root of what kind of drives I guess it's PTSD, and I think it's because I can't identify the actual trauma itself. I have it suppressed. And do you have experience of being able to help someone locate a suppressed trauma?
There are some float back techniques to help people. I think building a trust with your clinician, and then, exploring different things. Maybe there's trigger words that could be used to help you float back. For a lot of people, that's their way to survive. They got numb and they can't even recall specifics. They can't recall what age they were when a trauma happened. And that was their way to survive. And so if it still is a brick in a backpack subconsciously, You want to help them to retrieve those memories. And as I say, you want to go back to the earliest traumas that you can remember. And sometimes, you know, if you can't go all the way back, you know, clearing out a later one might clear out and give an opportunity for the person then to go back and clear out an earlier one. But there are some float back techniques that are used. And again, it's developing a lot of trust. And I do, for some people that are just having trouble getting there even, I do a suggestive state kind of protocol or intervention, as it were, and where I have the client write a narrative, and then I get them into a real suggestive state. It's almost like a self-hypnosis, although I'm doing the, you know, relaxing and the guiding. And then when they're in the most, the deepest part of the suggestive state, then I read the narrative that they've written about themselves, where they're going to be in touch with their inner pain, and they're going to, you know, and I might have to do that for a few weeks. And all of a sudden I did that with one of my clients, and man, he started opening up and going, I can start to remember things now. So, you know, you're brave, you know, like for him, it was, you're brave enough to help yourself heal from this god awful pain and, you know, that kind of thing. And he absolutely started to do that. So it was pretty powerful. So finding different things that can help you to do that when you trust somebody.
All right, that actually helps, because a lot of what I've done has been self-guided, and then I know that subconsciously, you know, there's a part of me that doesn't want to know what drives it.
And it's probably better to be safe with, if you can find a clinician, you know, it's better to be safe. That person wants you to be safe. When you're doing stuff on your own, you know, it could trigger things and be, you know, difficult for you. But if you can get somebody that knows what he or she is doing, I recommend people going to see somebody that are, there's a lot of people that claim to use EMDR, but if they're not trained by the EMDR Institute, they may not have all the protocols. And this has been researched for over 30 years.
Wow.
Thank you.
Wow. You know what, Deborah, let's end the formal portion of this program, and then anybody that wants to stay around on an informal basis and get more information or ask questions or share reactions, that would be absolutely great. But let's end the formal portion. And I think it's normal for somebody that experiences traumatic incidents to have trouble sleeping, to have upsetting experiences, to do those sorts of things. And if these symptoms persist, please seek help. And if you are suicidal in any way, shape, or form, please call the National Suicide Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK or 1-800-273-8255 and seek help. Do not sit in isolation, do not sit in silence, and do not become disconnected from those who love you. That would be part of the solution as well. Again, thank you all for participating. I really, really appreciate you being here and taking your time to share with us. Really enjoy it. Please go to jfwhitaker.com, our website, and look at future events. We have a very busy September. In addition to this web program, we have on September 20th, we're doing a book signing at Warwick's Bookstore in La Jolla, California. La Jolla is the oldest family-owned bookstore in the U.S. We'll be there September 20th from 2 to 4 p.m. And then on September 26th, I'll be doing a video interview in Las Vegas, Nevada, with the Veterans Transition Resource Center called Forgotten Promises. Okay? And I'll be doing an interview answering questions. It's an audience participation, much like this is. And for those of you who are interested, it's KDWN 720 AM on your dial or 101.5 FM. And just a little anecdote, I told a very, very young person, about 50 years younger than me, that she could tune in on KDWN 720 AM. And she said, isn't that a bit early? So for those of you who don't know what a radio is or what 720 AM on your dial is, the show is recorded and will be replayed on Facebook at the Veterans Transition Resource site, which is vtrc.us, and you can see it there. Also, one more thing, we've been recognized by the Vietnam Veterans National Memorial and Museum out of Columbus, Ohio. We are on their front page. At least the picture of me is on their front page, and you can click on that and go to the story, and it's under Inspiring Stories of Veterans. And so I'm very, very honored that that's there. And I want to thank my brother David for his help and support in making that happen. Things are looking up. Maybe we're headed out of this time that we're in. I certainly hope so. And please join us for any of these events. I certainly appreciate it, and I appreciate your support. With that, we'll end the formal portion. And if anybody wants to just hang around, we'll certainly chat with you. Thank you so very, very much.